Hey there guys, I am the Sixth Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. We are back with the second video about the armies of Renown, which Warhammer community posted. They actually posted it yesterday. I was recording this video yesterday, but unfortunately it got corrupted, so I apologize. It is coming out a day late, but here we are, second video of the armies of Renown. Now, if you haven't watched the Death Guard video, I will give you a very quick overview. The Armies of Renown rule is a new mechanic which is being introduced in the upcoming Warzone Caradon book, which is up for pre-order this weekend. And what it does is essentially allow you to build a very specific, focused, and thematic army, and you gain some buffs in the form of special rules, stratagems, relics, and that sort of thing. But at the cost of having some quite severe limitations to what you can bring to really make sure that you stick to that unique theme for your force. So for example, with the Death Guard Terminus Est Assault Force, it's heavily focused around Typhus and his love for shambling hordes of infantry. So you're restricted in that you cannot bring any units with the vehicle keyword. Any. And to balance it out, you get a unique psychic discipline to choose from, some unique stratagems and relics, and essentially a rule that lets your Plague Marines deep strike onto the board. I covered my thoughts on that force in the other video, so I won't dwell on it too much, but the other one that they showed off was the Adeptus Mechanicus defense cohort. And what this appears to be is a list which is themed around battle automata and an immovable line of metal and ceramite and robots with no care for the weak and pathetic flesh. I think overall it's a pretty cool for a themed army, and I kind of dig it. I do think that it would look pretty damn cool on the tabletop, just having loads of destroyers and Cataphron units and, you know, the robots and that kind of thing. It really would look like a sort of 60s Admech force. So I do like the theme of it, but obviously what is more important is how good are the rules. Well, the main army changing limitation for the defense cohort is that you cannot include Skitarii units, not in an allied detachment, not one little tiny model or unit, none at all. So I mean, right away that basically chops off half of the Admech codex right off the bat, but I mean, that's fine because we are here for big stompy shooty robots, right? So what does this force get to make up for losing their Skitarii brethren? Well, all Cataphron breaches, destroyers, servitors, and Castellan robots in your army gain the Extremis Sentinel protocols, and what this does is give you two very tasty abilities. The first of these is that whenever a ranged attack is allocated to a model in a unit with the Extremis Sentinel protocols rule, which is either wholly within your deployment zone or every model in that unit is within range of an objective, then the enemy must subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of any ranged attacks against your unit. I think this is really good, to be honest. Your units are already relatively survivable with mostly toughness 5 or 6 and either 3 or 4 up saves and, you know, a lot of wounds. So whether you're sat on an objective with a unit of destroyers or your opponent just happens to get first turn, your army is going to be much harder to shift, you know, with your enemy's firepower. Things like heavy bolters and autocannons dropping down to 1 damage each, and even things like las cannons and melters are going to be suffering a lot with that -1 to their damage roll, which means that your force is going to be hugely more resilient to a first turn opening salvo from your enemy. And then as the game progresses and you have your units moving up and claiming objectives, you really are going to be able to hold on to them incredibly well and make it so that your opponent has to dedicate a lot of firepower to shift your units off them. The second set of rules is somewhat odd. I know I said that both of the rules this force gave you were good, and I do think that the way this one is meant to be played does mean it will be quite potent, but technically, rules as written at the moment, this one doesn't actually do anything. It gives you the hold steady and the set to defend abilities, which are already things that any army can do in various pieces of terrain, and they essentially give you some slightly better overwatch or a slight boost to your melee output if you get charged. So what I think this is probably going to do, and I think it may just be the fact that these previews haven't given us like the full wording of the rules yet, I think that this means that your Extremis Sentinel units can do those actions, not actions, but go into those stances and use those abilities even if they aren't in a piece of terrain or a piece of cover, which would actually be a really nice buff to have, basically letting you have some really decent overwatch if you're charged by an enemy unit, or be able to swing back and hit pretty hard if you have some Castellan robots with those fists. So yeah, the second part, a bit iffy about at the moment because I don't know exactly how it's going to fully work, but if it works the way I think it will, it is quite potent. But overall, even if you completely ignore that second part for now, purely that -1 damage buff you can get for your units alone is, I think, much, much better than the Death Guard Deep Strike ability. And I also think that realistically for this force, the limitation of no Skitarii units is almost a non-factor. I'm not saying the Skitarii units are bad, but if you are going for the defense cohort list, then presumably you don't want any of the Skitarii stuff anyway, you just want more big stompy robots. So you're almost certainly not going to be looking at things from the Skitarii side of the codex anyway, so you don't really lose out on too much. Now, unlike the Death Guard, the Admech don't have any psychers, so they don't get their own unique discipline to bring, but we do get to see a couple of stratagems and a relic which is only usable by this army of Renown, and the first up is the Precalibrated Purge solution. This stratagem is quite a cool one really. For one command point, it allows you to select a unit in your deployment zone, and if you target an enemy unit within its deployment zone, you get a +1 to your hit rolls. Now, yes, at first this may seem a bit niche, and, I guess maybe it kind of is, but between your Castellan robots and your Cataphron destroyers, you do have a lot of weaponry with a 30-inch or a 36-inch range, so it's definitely possible for you to get turn 1 and be able to put down some really heavy firepower across no man's land and into a crucial enemy unit. And in that situation, being able to give yourself a +1 to hit for those attacks for just one command point is a really solid way of making sure that you can do some really good damage or kill off, at least a few models from a scary unit. Likewise, if your enemy has a unit camping on an objective in their deployment zone, or has a squad of, say, Devastators that isn't likely to move for most of the game, you can really punish them for staying in their deployment zone by using one of your backfield units with this stratagem. So yes, it does seem a little bit more niche than just a flat +1 to hit, but that bonus is always a useful one to have, and I do think that genuinely a lot of the time you will at least have a few good units in range to use it against. Up next we have the Bolster Defenses stratagem. This one is a bit less good in my opinion. For 2 command points you can select a piece of area terrain or an obstacle in your deployment zone, and it gains the light cover trait, or if it already had light cover, it instead gives you +2 to your saving throw instead of +1. This does seem really niche to me, and whilst it's not bad, if you have a unit of destroyers who just want to sit and shoot from a piece of terrain all game, this will push them to a very nice 2-up save. But I just think that for 2 command points to essentially give a unit an extra +1 to its armor save, I don't know, I think there are better ways to spend 2 command points. There will be times when you do want to use this, and it may be really key, but there's going to be lots of times where your enemy's army doesn't have any shooting or has so little shooting that you won't even really consider using this stratagem. Last up, we have a relic for the defense cohort. Forge Fire replaces a Volkite blaster, and compared to a regular blaster, it gives you +12 inches of range, taking you to 36 inches, a very nice extra -2 AP, and an extra point of damage, taking you to 2 damage. It still has the mortal wounds on an unmodified 6, which the normal Volkite has, and with 3 shots, it's not a bad little relic. I don't think you'll be taking this as your one free relic in the game, but if you are in the mood to give your Dominus a bit more shooting to help your list out, then spending a command point to give him this certainly isn't the absolute worst way to spend a command point. So that's it for the Adeptus Mechanicus defense cohort. I'll be honest, I do think it is a lot better than the Death Guard one, and I can honestly see it getting some use, unlike the Death Guard one, which I really don't see, except in sort of narrative games. I can't see it being used all that much at all, because sure, you lose a lot of the codex options not being able to take Skitarii, but as far as a pure survivable gunline list goes, this one could do pretty well. It's really survivable, and the lists that you will be bringing, the units you'll be taking, are already pretty hardy, and this just makes them even more difficult to kill. And their damage output in terms of their firepower isn't terrible, and it looks like there will be some stratagems to help buff it even further. But what do you think of the defense cohort? Do you think it's better than the Death Guard Army of Renown, or do you think that both are still a little bit subpar? Do let me know in the comments below, and let me know what other armies of Renown you would like to see Games Workshop do. As always, thank you very much for watching my videos, and please do like and subscribe if you would like to see more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.